Heels, perfume, a stack of papers fat enough to choke a staple. Then the shout, "Sign or go." In my kitchen. In the house I'd paid cash for with the quiet money people never post about. She had an audience buzzing in her phone, a lawyer on speed dial, and that smile people wear when they believe the map and the treasure are the same thing. I didn't argue. I uncapped the pen like a man preparing to butter toast. I skimmed, nodded, made a small loop of ink where she pointed, the loop I've been curling since grade school when I learned signatures are tiny theater. She thought it was the deed. It wasn't. She thought it was surrender. It was choreography. The fridge hummed. The dog refused to pick a side. I set the pen down and palmed my old matchbox off the counter out of habit. Useless thing, I don't smoke, but it weighs about as much as a decision. She told me to take nothing. I took my keys, my wallet, and the box of stale matches. I let the door close like I was the problem she'd finally solved. On the porch, the winter air felt clean enough to drink. I laughed once, quiet and mean, the way a joke laughs at the person who told it. She thought the night ended when I crossed the threshold. Did she really imagine a midnight signature could finish a story I started months ago? She thought confidence was a wardrobe, and she wore it loud. All week she'd been strutting in silk robes and laughter rehearsed for her phone screen, convinced she'd outmaneuvered me. The reason she could stand in that kitchen at midnight and scream was simple. She believed she had built a fortress of evidence. Her lawyer, sharp as vinegar, had drawn up papers thick with clauses. Her accountant had forged a trail of transfers, all pointing toward me as the bum draining the accounts. Her lover, a woman she paraded as a harmless friend from yoga, had already started appearing in brunch photos, tagged as family. In her world, she was the righteous queen cutting off dead weight, and I was supposed to crumble under the performance. I had to hand it to her. The showmanship was immaculate. She stacked the odds in plain sight. She staged pity parties over wine, dropping hints to our neighbors about how lonely she'd been. She uploaded selfies captioned with cryptic lines about betrayal. She even bought custom stationery printed with divorce, final draft. Who does that? It was like watching a magician pull doves from sleeves while I held the receipt for the birdcage. Every time she flaunted another step of her plan, she wasn't intimidating me. She was handing me props for my own act. The truth is, my suspicion had started long before the legal theater. I still remember the first red flag. A lipstick smear on the cuff of my dress shirt, crimson and clumsy. The kind of mark you can't pass off as laundry detergent. When I asked, she waved it away, said she'd been hugging a coworker, then scolded me for being paranoid. I let her words hang there, heavy and ridiculous, like a chandelier that everyone pretends won't fall. The smear became a breadcrumb, and I started collecting the trail. It was almost funny how the pieces lined up when I stopped pretending not to see them. An Uber charge to an address we'd never visited. A dinner bill signed with her handwriting but 2 entrees and a dessert she hated. An unexplained weekend at a wellness retreat where the only yoga was performed on hotel sheets. I didn't need private investigators. I just needed a decent memory and a shoebox. And yet she never saw me noticing. She mistook my silence for stupidity. I would come home, find her scrolling through group chats where she and her lover tested out ways to make me look incompetent, and I'd just nod, ask if she wanted tea, and file the moment away in the ledger I was keeping. Her arrogance wasn't born overnight. It was fed by the applause of her inner circle. Friends who clapped every time she hinted that she'd move on soon. In-laws who never hid their disdain for the man who, in their version of the story, was too ordinary for their glittering daughter. They all became her echo chamber. She thought a chorus made the song true. What none of them knew was that I'd already begun humming a different tune, one that didn't end with me on the curb. My plan didn't start with lawyers or loopholes. It started with observation. Every joke she made at my expense in front of guests was another seed. Every forged transfer was another thread. Every brunch selfie with her lover was another nail. I wasn't building a wall to defend myself. I was weaving a net to let her fall right through. By the time she shoved those papers at me in the kitchen, she believed she was playing checkmate. But I had been playing a longer game. Months before her silk-robed theatrics, I'd opened a quiet trust in our child's name. locked away the house deed, and documented her little adventures with the precision of an archivist. Not once did I raise my voice or tip my hand. That was the real trick. She mistook calm for defeat. I let her think she'd won because her pride needed the illusion. She wanted me to sign away my life at midnight. I wanted her to think she'd orchestrated my downfall. She thought she was chasing me out of my own house. I knew she was marching herself into the fire. And so when she shouted, "Sign or go," she was right in only one sense. Something was leaving that night. But it wasn't me. It was her perfect little empire, already smoldering, already one careless breath away from ash. Month 1 began with a laundry accident and a red smear that did not belong to me. I held the shirt under the tap and watched the water blush like it was embarrassed for us both, and I pretended to believe in cheap dye because denial is a soft chair. I said nothing. I took a photo of the collar on my phone and labeled it with the date. Then I did the petty thing and bought the same detergent again to keep the pattern clean if it repeated. It repeated. Month 2. I started collecting curiosities the way some men collect bottle caps. A valet stub from a hotel I hadn't visited. 2 champagne flutes charged to my card at a bar that played saxophone after midnight. A calendar invite on her tablet with a single letter, S, and a heart the size of a fly. I screenshotted, exported, and slid everything into a folder on my desktop named Groceries, because sometimes the safest place is the most boring one. I told the dog he was now head of security and he yawned like a union man. I kept my face steady. I cooked dinners. I paid bills with unromantic punctuality. I laughed at the right jokes. The house sat still like a photo of itself. Month 3. I involved a friend who retired out of a paralegal desk and into her garden. She loved 2 things, hardy perennials and immaculate forms. I brought coffee and a spiral notebook, and she brought a cathedral of sticky notes and a pen that could write on butter. We built a list that did not look like revenge. It looked like errands. Notarize the boring thing. Photograph the serial numbers. Print bank statements twice and put 1 copy where even spiders forget. Do nothing illegal, do everything documented. No heroics, no midnight trucks, no crowbars. The file we made we titled 4 Ashes, a private joke that kept us tidy. Month 4. I changed the passwords she never used and left the ones she liked sitting fat and obvious, a decoy bowl of candy on Halloween. I checked the deed and saw what I knew. Paid in full. My name, no balloon strings attached. I created a small, irrevocable trust for my kid with a neutral trustee who had a face like a courthouse and the personality of a paperweight. I told myself I was buying a fire extinguisher and hoped I'd never pull the pin. I set up a lockbox at a bank that smelled like carpet cleaner and secrets, and I placed inside it a thumb drive, a handwritten inventory, and the kind of cheap ballpoint pen clerks forget to pocket. Month 5. I practiced patience like a sport. I played oblivious so convincingly I should have sent myself an invoice. When she said she was exhausted from Pilates, I said, "Take a night off and leave the dishes." When she posted a photo captioned, "Me time," I hit the heart and kept the screen from shaking. I let a rumor leak through a mutual who loved gossip more than food. He might leave for a contract in Denver. He's been distant. He's not happy. I counted to 10 and watched her accelerate. She took longer showers, shorter dinners, louder goodbyes. She stayed late on nights when my spreadsheet lit up with charges from places whose menus had dress codes. I bought a cheap shoebox at a pharmacy and started dropping paper into it with the discipline of a monk feeding birds. I tucked the matchbox under the rubber band and told myself it was a totem, not a tool. The paralegal friend made me rehearse what to say if I ever needed to say it, which was mostly nothing. Let the paper talk. Let dates kiss other dates. Let time do the kind of math no one argues with. I cataloged the lover as a silhouette at first, careful manicure in a reflection in a window, a name with too many vowels showing up on receipts like a watermark. I did not hunt. I allowed her to outline herself. In between, I lived. I ironed shirts. I changed the porch bulb. I laughed with a neighbor about squirrels who thought they owned the fence. I taught the dog a new trick where he pretended to think. The house kept its secrets, and I kept mine. Every night, before bed, I opened the folder labeled Groceries and looked at the quiet storm gathering in neat lines. Not to gloat, to check the weather. Patience did not make me kind, it made me accurate. By the time month 6 came, the box had weight, the folder had chapters, and my face had learned to be furniture. The plan wasn't a plan so much as a calendar with the weekends crossed out, which is to say it felt ordinary. When the call finally rang out at midnight and she marched in with the papers and the performance, I knew my part, and I knew my audience would arrive in the morning wearing suits and coffee breath. I slept fine that night because a dull blade had become sharp without ever leaving the drawer. The kitchen at midnight could have been a stage, and she entered like she had rehearsed the script for weeks. Hair sprayed stiff, robe tied like a judge's gown, a stack of papers fanned across the island as if they were holy scripture. She didn't even sit. She slammed the folder flat and barked, "Sign or go," her voice cracking the silence like a broom handle against glass. I looked at the dog. He blinked at me, then back at her, then at me again. Poor guy wasn't getting paid enough to pick sides. I picked up the pen like a man agreeing to autograph a stranger's yearbook. The fridge buzzed, the clock ticked, and my wife's eyes glittered with the kind of confidence only people who believe their own press releases can muster. She was certain this was the finale, curtain call, encore, all in one. What she didn't know was that the playbill had been rewritten months ago, and she wasn't holding the latest draft. She thought the page I signed was the deed or the divorce. It was neither. It was a harmless old clause we'd filed years back, some maintenance waiver tucked inside the pile like parsley on a plate. My pen looped the same funny curl I'd drawn since I was 12, a swirl that looked more like a doodle than a signature, and she watched like she'd just won a jackpot. I let her. I capped the pen, slid it back, and she actually clapped once. Soft, smug applause in the dead of night. Then came the theater of eviction. She gestured to the door, chin high, the robe flaring like wings. "Leave the keys," she said. I didn't. I placed them in my pocket along with the matchbox that had been rattling around the counter. I'd picked it up earlier without thought. Now it felt like a prop. She didn't notice. She was too busy texting someone under the table, probably the lover waiting for her cue. I pictured them giggling over champagne, rehearsing lines like high school kids in a play. She thought I was walking into the cold, stripped of everything. I was walking into the cold, carrying evidence disguised as groceries and patience disguised as surrender. I glanced once at the pile of papers she guarded like treasure. They looked heavy, but weight isn't worth much when the numbers on the pages are already dust. She didn't know that. She believed the lawyer had crafted her fortress. The accountant had mortared her bricks. The lover was the finishing bow. She never noticed the foundation was already wet. Outside, the air snapped against my ears. I let the door click behind me. Not a slam, just the sigh of wood meeting frame. I made a little bow to the empty porch light as if thanking an invisible audience. Across the street, a window blinked awake, then dark again, someone wondering if a raccoon had tipped a bin. No raccoons here, just me, playing the fool who lost. My pocket jingled with keys and matches. Her voice still echoed, "Sign or go," but it sounded like a bad recording now, tinny and hollow. I leaned against my car, grinned at the absurdity, and whispered to no one, "Act 1, complete." In that moment, I wasn't bitter. I was amused. Because I knew the script she'd memorized was already obsolete, and by morning the critics, her lawyer, her circle, the crowd she staged for, would review a play they never bought tickets for. That midnight scene wasn't an ending. It was an intermission dressed as victory, and I was the only one who knew the second act would burn brighter than any spotlight she had dreamed of. By dawn, she was already celebrating, hair tied in a smug bun, robe traded for silk pajamas, coffee steaming in her favorite cup like it had been brewed by applause. I sat in my car down the block watching the lights flicker in my own windows, and I pictured her humming, maybe even telling herself she had won. She thought a midnight signature had gutted me, had carved my fortune neatly into her hands. The reality was less poetic. What she had was a pile of paper with no teeth, and what I had was an arsenal of boring details that bite harder than any lawyer's growl. At 7 sharp, her attorney called me, voice dripping with triumph, already rehearsing the headlines. But by 7:10, that voice cracked like a cheap plate. He had just opened the file from the clerk's office and realized the agreement she'd forced under neon fridge light was about as binding as a grocery list. The timing clause I'd triggered weeks earlier meant every document after a certain date was suspended in limbo. My loop of ink the night before wasn't surrender, it was graffiti on a decoy page. I could almost hear him sweating. At 8, I watched my phone buzz with messages from her brunch circle. Screenshots of her bragging, photos of the champagne cork in her sink, the smirking caption, "Finally free." I let them pile up until 9, when the first journalist I had slipped my package to published a teaser. Whistleblower reveals embezzlement pattern linked to socialite couple. The words weren't mine. They were the accountant's stamped receipt, the lover's giddy text about easy transfers, the photo of lipstick and a hotel stub dated the same day she swore she was volunteering. Evidence doesn't gossip, it detonates. By 10, the soufflé collapsed. Her lawyer rang again, this time not triumphant but furious, spitting words like inadmissible and fabricated, except the fabric was woven from her own threads. I almost felt sorry. Almost. Instead, I laughed into my coffee cup and drove past the cafe where she sat in sunglasses too big for her face. She stared at her phone like it was a death sentence. Her lawyer gestured wildly beside her, arms flapping, trying to put out a fire with a cocktail napkin. She didn't see me. I didn't honk. I let her think the sky itself had turned against her. Back at my office, my paralegal friend handed me a donut and said, "Well, that was faster than I thought." We ate like it was any other Thursday. The world outside was falling apart for her, sponsors backing out, events quietly canceled, the accountant who once carried her secrets now testifying in carefully typed emails. I pictured her at noon screaming at the mirror, blaming everyone but the reflection. By 2, she tried to call me, 3 times in a row. I let the phone buzz, screen down. By 3:30, another article appeared. Charity funds mismanaged. Evidence points to director's spouse. That was the lover's handiwork. Money moved in neat circles that now looked like nooses. The comment section filled with disbelief, gossip turning to knives. By 4, the house lights dimmed. Literally, I had arranged for utilities to revert to my account, and without warning, her card was declined. A perfect metaphor. Her power blinked out with a pop. I imagined she stood in the kitchen where she had staged my humiliation, holding a phone that refused her, staring at a fridge that hummed betrayal. The papers she had guarded so fiercely were suddenly nothing but ash on glossy letterhead. By 5, I drove past again. Same sunglasses, same cafe, same silence. She looked like a statue left out in the rain, all shine stripped, only cracks showing. And me? I rolled down the window, let the air slap my face, and grinned at the absurdity. All it had taken was patience, ink, and a shoebox of receipts. Her perfect life wasn't stolen. It was combustible. All I did was strike the match. Her downfall didn't arrive like a single crash. It unraveled like a luxury rug being rolled up, inch by inch, while she scrambled to stand on it. The morning after her cafe scene, banks began freezing accounts tied to the suspicious transfers, and the lover she'd paraded at brunch vanished from every tag, every photo, every friendly timeline, as if she'd never existed. I didn't need to lift a finger. Silence and paperwork did the work. Her friends, the ones who toasted her freedom, deleted posts faster than bleach erases stains. Sponsors called to postpone events, which is the polite word for exile. Her perfect invitations went unanswered. Her inbox filled not with praise but inquiries, the kind with subject lines that make even lawyers flinch. I watched from a distance, detached amusement stitched into every hour. She had strutted through rooms calling me a burden, a man living off her glamour. Now the glamour was peeling, and she stood naked in the cold light of exposure. Court dates circled red on her calendar turned into weapons against her. The lawyer who once clapped her shoulder now looked at her like an unpaid bill. Her accountant tried to backpedal, offering explanations, but the receipts I'd cataloged didn't stutter. They sang in perfect harmony, a choir of betrayal that couldn't be silenced. I kept remembering the night she screamed, "Sign or go," and how her voice cracked on the word sign. That crack became the soundtrack of her ruin. Public sympathy turned inside out. Strangers who once envied her pearls now whispered fraud when she passed. She walked into boutiques where clerks once fawned and now eyed her like shoplifters. Her lover, the great co-conspirator, filed a quiet restraining order to protect her own name, leaving my wife to drown alone. Even her own mother stopped answering calls, embarrassed to be linked to headlines. I had set nothing on fire in the literal sense, yet ash clung to her life as if a bonfire had swept through it. Every choice she made had been tinder. I had only arranged the breeze. When the judge finally opened the folder that carried my funny little signature loop, the courtroom turned into theater. Her lawyer barked objections, but the judge waved him down and asked why his client's evidence was riddled with altered dates. The silence that followed was worth more than any verdict. She tried to glare at me, but the glare collapsed under the weight of her own performance. I sat steady, letting her burn in the heat of her own spotlight. Her perfect life dissolved in front of her like ink in water, staining everything she touched. My plan was never pyrotechnics. It was patience disguised as incompetence. Let her believe she'd won. Let her scream in my kitchen. Let her bask in the illusion of power. Because when morning came, all she had was a pile of ash dressed up as victory. She lost the house, the accounts, the friends, the lover, the narrative. And all I had to do was wait, steady as stone, until her own arrogance pressed the detonator I'd hidden months ago. Watching her empire collapse wasn't triumphal, it was almost clinical. But I won't lie. I laughed. Quiet, sharp, the kind of laugh you share with yourself when the punchline lands exactly as written. She thought she'd evicted me from my life. The truth was, she had evicted herself, and all I had done was hold the door. When the dust finally settled, the house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a hollow stage set after the actors had gone home. I walked through each room slowly, not gloating, just taking inventory of what remained. The walls were the same. The dog still trailed me with nails clicking on hardwood. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee. But the silence had changed its shape. It wasn't the heavy silence of suspicion anymore. It was lighter, like a curtain finally dropping after an overlong performance. I reclaimed the house the way one reclaims a chair after someone else has kept it warm. Quietly, without ceremony. The locks were changed by the end of the week. Utilities already in my name thanks to those boring forms I'd filed months earlier. She had tried to drag me out with a flourish. I returned with a key that still worked and a grin that said nothing. My first act wasn't revenge. It was making pancakes for my kid on a Saturday morning, batter sizzling while cartoons played in the background. No champagne, no triumphal toast, just flour dust on the counter and a fork clinking against a plate. That was victory, at least the kind that lasts. My paralegal friend laughed when I called it Operation Breakfast, but she agreed that small things matter more than court filings. As for my wife, ex-wife now in every sense that counts, her life shrank like wool in a hot wash. She made headlines, but the kind that rot reputations. She tried to paint herself as a victim of trickery, but every receipt, every screenshot, every timestamp pointed back to her own hand. The lover she once paraded didn't so much leave as vanish, erasing photos, changing numbers, moving across town. Friends who had clapped at her midnight theater refused to return calls. I didn't need to mock her. Life was already doing it with ruthless efficiency, and yet I wasn't cruel. I didn't dance on her ashes. I didn't spray her name across tabloids or feed gossip to neighbors. I let the evidence speak, let the silence hold her accountable. The best revenge wasn't fire. It was absence. Absence of lies. Absence of pretense. Absence of her shadow in my hallway. I found myself cleaning closets and discovering shirts I hadn't worn in years. Cooking recipes she always dismissed as too plain. Laughing with my kid at stupid cartoons she claimed were a waste of time. The freedom was not loud. It was gentle, steady, almost shy. I thought of the matchbox I'd pocketed that night. I left it on the kitchen table as a paperweight for bills. Every time I saw it, I remembered restraint, that I didn't need to light anything to watch her illusions burn. Patience had been flame enough. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder if she understood yet. Did she sit in a smaller apartment, staring at her reflection, asking herself how a man she called weak had undone her so thoroughly? Or did she still cling to the belief that someone else was to blame? I'll never know, and I don't care. My life is not built on her answers anymore. My life is built on breakfasts, quiet laughter, and a dog who finally stopped pacing at night. I had thought victory would taste like triumph, but it tasted like calm water. I didn't win by destroying her. I won by surviving her. And that, in the end, was the sharpest twist of all. I used to think revenge would feel like fireworks, loud and blinding, the kind you watch with a crowd and a beer in your hand. Instead, it felt like tea steeping in silence, the steam curling up in an empty kitchen where no one was shouting anymore. Her downfall was messy, public, humiliating, but my healing was private. I started with small rituals, watering the lawn myself, cooking simple dinners, reading in the chair by the window. Each act reminded me I was still here, that peace doesn't have to announce itself. My kid laughed louder, the dog slept easier, and I breathed without waiting for the next storm. I won't pretend the betrayal didn't scar me. It did. But scars don't scream. They whisper reminders of what I survived. I learned that patience is sharper than rage, and dignity weighs more than revenge. In the end, I didn't burn her life down with matches. I let her set fire to her own illusions while I saved what mattered. And maybe that's the quiet truth. You don't need to destroy someone to be free of them. You just need to step back, let time do its work, and choose not to carry the ashes. If you've ever been forced to sign at midnight, remember this: you can still write your own ending in the morning.